Welcome to New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berlendick. Joining me, as always, is Angelo Giuliano. And joining us this week is Rasheed from the Red Pill Diaries and also Danny Haiphong. And I will put all of their information in the video description below after the show is over. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining me this evening. But your mornings, Danny and Rasheed, I really appreciate that. And thank you, everybody who is joining us from all around the world. And before we get started, if you have a question, just type in like a capital Q or question in all caps. I'll star it and we'll try to get to it at the end of the show. And if any of you gentlemen need to leave for any reason, don't worry about it. If you're tired or you have something scheduled, you're more than welcome to go. And you're always welcome back next week. So why don't we get right into the topic? The topic is basically continuity of agenda. The topic is the Trump administration waging war against Yemen, a complete continuation of the Biden administration's policies in the Middle East. Why? What is the reason for that? And this whole situation with Ukraine, a president who said he was going to end the conflict in 24 hours, in which he never could have done, but he could have announced decisions in 24 hours that would have eventually ended the conflict. He just cut all aid to Ukraine, which means he could have done that at any time. And he could have walked away from the whole conflict and it would have wrapped itself up, but he's not. Why? So we're going to get into all of that. I think a good place to start will be Yemen. And I'll just start with this, just a starting point. This New York Times article: Trump orders attacks on militant sites in Yemen and issues a warning to Iran. So what did we warn before President Trump even stepped into office? All of these wars were going to continue, especially war with Iran and also China. So that is exactly where this is all headed. And why? Why are we attacking? Let's see if he says why. Well, anyway, Danny, you posted something on X and you were getting all kinds of responses. Why didn't you talk about that? Let's talk about the underlying problems here as well.
Yeah, well, let's begin with this. The Trump administration, I had Larry Johnson on my program yesterday, and he said something which I think is 100% true, that Donald Trump is bought and paid for by Israel, AIPAC, the Israeli lobby. We have to be honest about this. His campaign received enormous cash flow from people like Miriam and Sheldon Adelson. This has been the case for Donald Trump ever since he ascended into politics. And his policies relating to West Asia have demonstrated this quite clearly. Donald Trump did not want to enter the presidency with an active genocide occurring. So that's why he brokered the Biden May 2024 ceasefire. That's why he got it done. However, ever since that occurred, Israel has still been killing 4 Palestinians a day, every single day in Gaza. And Israel and the United States have completely shut off aid, a complete 100% blockade of Gaza, starving the people of Palestine there. And that had led to Yemen, Ansar Allah, restarting their naval blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea, and other relevant corridors. And this is why Donald Trump launched this war, because he's doing it on behalf of Israel. He could not allow, and he does not want to allow, Yemen to essentially stand up for Palestine and assert and enforce the Geneva Conventions through this blockade, which has already and had already hurt Israel's economy over the course of those 12 plus months which the blockade was operating before the Gaza ceasefire. So he decided to go scorched earth on Yemen, just like the Biden administration did on multiple occasions. And what did that end up doing? It did very little except for kill civilians, destroy Yemen's infrastructure, and Ansar Allah and the resistance kept going. And that is exactly what's going to happen now. Ansar Allah is already firing projectiles. There will be consequences for the United States in the region. You can bet that destroyers will be targeted in the Mediterranean. This is what's going to happen from here. But this really is all about Donald Trump pursuing the same exact policy as the Biden administration. And so when I pointed out that Donald Trump's foreign policy record now will include the starvation of Palestinian people and the continuation of Israel's US-backed war in the region, now hitting Yemen, people from the so-called MAGA contingent couldn't handle it. They are having what I believe is a similar reaction from, and I came of age during the Obama era, so I know this very, very well. And I spent years criticizing and condemning Obama's foreign policy and getting just an immense amount of flack from the so-called Democratic Party, quote unquote, left side. Now the MAGA side, despite this being Trump's second term, where he isn't delivering on anything concrete, because talks are not concrete, and I will give all the credit in the world for talking to Russia, but it does not equal any kind of concrete deal, one that's enforceable and one that we can say has actually brought peace to anywhere for anything, let alone Ukraine. So that is a work in process. And I know we're going to talk about how contradictory everything has become and how there are obvious machinations and developments that show that the conflict in Ukraine could very much rage on for many years to come. But back to West Asia, back to the Middle East, when I pointed this out, they couldn't handle it. There's just all kinds of excuses made for Donald Trump, similar to how people made excuses for Obama. Oh, he can't do it all. Oh, he needs to focus on Russia right now. Well, what about the Yemen? They're terrorists. What about Ansar Allah? They're terrorists. You can't. How are you saying there are civilians being killed? Are they all living in military bases? Because that's what Donald Trump is targeting. It's just all kinds of excuses made for the fact that Donald Trump is literally pursuing the same exact policy as the Biden administration in Yemen and in West Asia. The only difference being is that Donald Trump is a new president coming into a situation that he wanted to save face from. Now that he is moving into the later stages of what still is a very early presidency, he is beginning to show his true colors. And this is what has happened during every single U.S. presidency. We can just look since the end of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Soviet Union. Every U.S. president has done this. They've come in making promises. They'll move very briefly on those promises. And then what they'll do in terms of talk and rhetoric, and then what they'll do is they'll do what U.S. foreign policy is designed to do, which is to expand empire, maintain hegemony, and of course, utilize, exploit, and push forward proxies like Israel and defend them and maintain them and strengthen them so that the U.S. foreign policy blob, the establishment, can continue onward toward its ultimate objectives. And Yemen, I'm not surprised Yemen is the first to be hit with Trump era warfare, because to be quite frank, Yemen is, and this might seem hyperbolic to some, is the strongest arm of the resistance still, because it has been able to do concrete damage to Israel's economy. And just for the fact that it can survive and strengthen under the worst and most deplorable conditions only strikes even more fear into the Trump administration, which everything that Trump has done so far is about saving face. And we can see that with Mahmoud Khalil trying to deport Palestinian activists, pro-Palestine activists in the United States. And we can also see that in the region where every single move made is about preventing what the Biden administration ultimately became completely mired in, which was a regional war that was only going to degrade and make the U.S.'s overall stature in the world weaker in the public eye. That's what Trump wants to avoid, but he's doing it by trying to go scorched earth on everything. I mean, he's even calling Chuck Schumer a rabid Zionist Palestinian. Like, this is how absolutely unhinged Donald Trump really is. He's showing his true colors, and people who support Donald Trump's so-called peace platform in any area, Russia or otherwise, have to understand that rhetoric does not mean reality. And we are seeing reality now. We are seeing hundreds of people being killed, injured in Yemen. The total is going to be higher than that by the time this is all over. And it's just a prelude to what we can expect from Trump in the Middle East. It's going to be about war, because Israel cannot sustain itself. It cannot go on. It cannot pursue what it wants without war. And the United States finds itself completely and utterly dependent on Israel to maintain its hegemony in that part of the world.
I forget who said it last live stream, but someone said that Iran is the soft underbelly of the pillars and multipolarism. Rasheed, I thought it was you, and that is exactly what this is all about. So Israel is to the Middle East what Ukraine is to Eastern Europe. It is a U.S. proxy, is a very valuable, long-standing U.S. proxy. It is a forward operating base for first British and now American interests in the region. And this is all aimed at Iran. And President Trump has talked specifically about Iran in regards to striking Yemen. And I just want to point this out, and I finally found it. And this is President Trump saying this: today I've ordered the U.S. military to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. He said they have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircraft, and drones. What are all these American ships and bases and troops? What is Yemen striking these ships in their ports back in the United States, or are they on the other side of the planet off of Yemen's coasts? And are these ships and troops and bases that have been part of a decade-spanning campaign of military aggression, illegal occupation, and simply burning nation states to the ground, the most recent being Syria? One more thing I want to add before we get to Angelo and Rasheed. We were just watching the U.S. installed terrorists, HTS terrorists, Al-Qaeda in Syria. They are literally still listed by the State Department as a foreign terrorist organization. They are mass slaughtering Alawite Christians and other ethnic religious minorities in Syria. And President Trump is dropping bombs on Yemen, but he doesn't have even one bomb to spare to drop on al-Jawlani's head in Damascus. Not a single bomb or Tomahawk cruise missile to spare to target the infrastructure of HTS, a U.S. government-listed terrorist organization. They have even bombed targets in Syria, just not HTS, al-Jawlani, or the infrastructure he is using to mass slaughter civilians. Again, Danny, you're talking about ridiculous excuses. Oh, Brian, aren't these the supporters of Assad? No, these are just ordinary people who do not want to live in a country ruled by a literal terrorist organization. The one thing everyone involved, whether it's the US, Russia, China, UN, doesn't matter, they all agree HTS is a terrorist organization. So it's just off the tracks in complete insanity. And people who are still supporting Trump at this juncture are, by necessity, they're ignoring all of this. They're sidestepping all of this. They will not address any of this. It gets worse when we actually talk about Ukraine. But Angelo, I'll give you the floor, and then Rasheed, and then we will continue wading through all of this.
But when it comes to MAGA, it can be counterintuitive, especially for people that actually have a very superficial approach. Because you see, we could actually play the devil's advocate. They come up, what do they say when it comes to Israel? They say, well, MAGA, Trump, they stopped, slaughtering Palestinians. Well, there was nothing actually when Trump came into power, there was nothing else to destroy in Gaza. Gaza was completely destroyed. The next step would be just to annihilate completely the whole population, which they can't. But everything is destroyed. The job has been done. It's the preparation for real estate project. It's been done. Now it's looking for options to displace people. No, and so we can play the devil's advocate. What we are getting is in terms of answers from MAGA people. The same with Ukraine. Is actually reaching out to Putin, and he's talking to Putin. Well, okay, well, that's a good thing. At least it's slightly better than Biden. But he has his plan, and we have explained the plan. That's a division of labor. When you look at every single step that is done, what he has achieved. Number one, he wants to achieve that he doesn't want to be the one that loses the war against Ukraine. So he doesn't want to have the blame. So it's a shifting blame to Zelensky and Biden. But what he has achieved there is that basically EU now is in a position that they can raise 800 billion euro, which was impossible before. Now, they've been trying to raise the military spending to 3 to 5%. Now they might be able to reach 5%, and this is going to be a burden for EU. Now he can actually shift the attention and the resources towards China. So the problem is that that's what we're facing. We're facing people that have a very selective view on what is happening. Uh, why is he reaching out to Ukraine? It's very simple. The Ukrainian front is collapsing, but people have a very selective approach. They see what they want to see. And believe me, Brian, if Trump does something good, I will be the first one to say he did something good. I will. I have no reason. I'm not part of a cult. And they simplify. When you start, criticizing Trump, oh, you are pro Biden. I mean, Biden was the worst. I've been hitting on Biden the whole time. And believe me, I don't take any pleasure to hitting on Trump. But I hit on Trump because we do the homework. We know it's about analyzing the speeches, and I think when you look at the especially the speech on exit, I think Peter exit, that speech was so important, and people, they haven't been listening. They've been selected on what they wanted to listen. And when you look at the whole strategy, it does make sense. Actually, it's a division of labor. And ultimately, there was even, I don't know if you guys noticed, Trump, what he wants to do is to make sure that the gas and oil, the prices go down. And actually, it's very similar to what they did to the USSR. Remember, the US reached out back then to Saudi Arabia to actually increase the production, so it would actually make the prices of energy, and especially oil, to drop. And that was extremely damaging to USSR. So the USSR's economy started suffering. They are trying to do that at the same time. And I think they're very simplistic. They don't realize that it's not going to work with Putin. This is not the Russia you have today. Is not the USSR, in the 80s and 90s. So I will maybe I'll leave it to Rasheed. But the problem we have is just people are just being very selective on what they want to see and superficial. It is about doing the homework, really. What's the long-term plan? And the long-term plan is very clear. It's a division of labor, that's all. But the objective is the same.
Rashid.
I think what's missing is time. I think that gets overlooked in the whole situation. When you look at the massive debt that the United States continues to run, when you look at the deficit spending that she continues to run her government and her military on, that is one of the main things that should be key. So when we look at the strategic area like West Asia and what's going on right now with Yemen, Somalia, North Africa, and the move towards Iran, the reason that they're doing it is because of time. The empire is running out of time. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and they're moving. They're trying to soften, as I said before, they're trying to soften up the Middle East so that Israel can make its move on Iran, so that they can try to, in their minds, to neutralize Iran, so that the United States could then focus on China, while Europe tries to keep everything smoldering between Ukraine and Russia, because the empire's debt situation won't allow it to reach all its tentacles out like it used to. And most people, when they're talking about the economic, the military situation, they don't understand that the U.S. is vying for time. She can't kick that debt burden down the road anymore, because now you see China, now you see Russia, you see all of the BRICS nations are now moving towards an alternative financial system. That means that America can't project debt in perpetuity. And that means she has to throw some type of monkey wrench to keep the world off course from bringing in some type of new financial system. So what do? You attack the strategic areas of the world. You want West Asia in total chaos. You want North Africa in total chaos, so that you can dominate the waterways, the land and trade routes, so that you can then focus on China, which they have already said is their most pressing threat, while pacifying Russia, because ultimately you want to double back on Russia because of Russia's nuclear potential and all of its resources. So if you can defeat China, you buy the empire time, and they can slowly adjust their financial order, because they have subdued China, and they believe that if they can subdue China, if they can knock Iran off, then they can go back to Russia, and then they can move on Russia and take control of its resources. So the mass slaughter of the Palestinians is one part of the main goal, and the rebuilding of Gaza under U.S. and Israeli control. That is a byproduct of imperial thought, because they want to remove every obstacle to dollar hegemony. And that's why you see them hidden, like Danny said, they're hidden the Houthis, because the Houthis have exacted a huge economic toll on America, not on Israel, and on all of America's partners who are aiding Israel with the supply of weapons. Now, when we go back to Donald Trump and we talk about this is Biden's war, a lot of people keep saying, and even Donald Trump said, this is Biden's war. But we forget that he had a presidency before Biden, and he doubled the funding for the training of the Ukrainian soldiers. He doubled funding for the weapons of Ukrainian soldiers, and he doubled funding for the so-called government, which he now calls a dictatorship. So how can we have amnesia about this? All of this stuff is a head fake, everybody, and I'll leave it right there. We can go further.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
No, well, okay, Danny. I just want to show people this, because I do keep hearing that. I hear President Trump himself continuously saying this is Biden's war. He's responsible. President Trump, during his 4 years in office, his first term in office, he helped prepare for and provoke the war in Ukraine. He played an equal role. He could have spoke up about it. He could have stopped it. People made excuses for him back then. Oh, he's got bad advisors. He didn't know what he was doing. He's such a young buck. He has no experience. But he brags even to this day about arming Ukraine. And then in the Oval Office, he's demanding Zelensky thank him for sending weapons to Ukraine, which almost certainly precipitated this war, or at least contributed towards it, burning the country to the ground. Thank us for burning your country to the ground. Oh, by the way, sign this mineral deal so we can sift through the ashes and see if there's anything valuable we can cart off back to the U.S. Danny, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to reinforce Rasheed's point, because when, as you said, Brian, Trump continues to say this is Biden's war, everything that's happening now is Biden's fault. That is just typical U.S. politics. It's just that Trump is louder. Trump is less perhaps politically inclined. He just says what he says. But that's how all U.S. presidents play politics. They blame whoever came before them so that whatever they do in the present is justified. And to this point that you were making, Rasheed, it's a really good one, because I've been saying since Donald Trump came into office, everyone looked at him like this ascendant. Look at the mandate he has. Look how powerful he is. He's going to come in and change everything. And from day one, I was urging people to understand that the United States is in a far weaker position now than truly it has ever been as an empire. Now, Brian, I love having you on my show and talking to you, because you always remind that just because the United States is in a weaker position doesn't mean it can't create a lot of damage and cause a lot of harm and cause trouble. And that is all true, because as the United States gets more desperate, as you were saying, Rasheed, as it loses its grip over its financial and economic hegemony, it is not able to compete in any sort of way worldwide with this rising multipolar world. It cannot stop the ascendancy of China. It cannot stop the rise of Russia. It cannot keep Iran from continuing to integrate into a multipolar world despite starvation sanctions. It can't stop these countries from pursuing their own independent path. And Donald Trump came into office at a point where that reality was not only accelerating to a point that is truly unstoppable in many respects, but he was coming in with a mandate to do something about it. And that is what people completely miss. They believe that because he was talking peace in Ukraine, that meant he actually wanted peace in Ukraine, rather than, if you listen to everything Pete Hegseth, his literal Secretary of Defense, what he has said, he has chopped up the world into points of responsibility, as you, Brian and Angelo, have constantly reminded us. It's right there in his speeches. He talks about U.S. going for China, while Europe goes for Russia. And to be quite frank, while they don't talk about the Middle East so much, it was quite obvious. And now with the bombing of Yemen, it is quite clear that the United States sees West Asia as its responsibility as well, because you know what, no one else is going to take care of it for Israel. So this is the dilemma that Trump entered office into. And the bombing of Yemen right now is just a manifestation of this deepening desperation, the loss of U.S. legitimacy worldwide, the loss of U.S. economic dominance worldwide, which is translating into, which I've been saying for years and years, ever since the Obama era, it translates into harsher, fiercer, more expansive and dangerous and cataclysmic and potentially nuclear wars. That is where all of this is heading. But Donald Trump has a really, 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 really hard lesson coming to him, because he constantly blames Biden for what happened before. Biden. Well, if you just looked back at what happened during the Biden administration, bombing Yemen, bombing Hodeidah Port, bombing Sana'a, bombing residential neighborhoods, trying to defeat Ansar Allah, it doesn't work, because you cannot bomb an underground resistance that just comes right back up with its hypersonic weapons, and it will continue to attrit with whatever it has. However, people think it's meager. It is very significant, because the United States wouldn't be bombing Yemen if it wasn't. They are, as Rasheed said, scared of the economic consequences that this tiny, completely impoverished, nearly genocided to extinction country is bringing to bear on the empire. And I don't think there's any bigger manifestation of how weak that makes the United States look worldwide. And it's causing Donald Trump a complete and utter crisis in terms of how he frames himself, how he frames his administration versus what the reality really is.
And Danny, you were saying about how this is MAGA Obama, and I was just thinking about how, because I remember those 8 years very clearly. I was already writing articles that whole time, and I remember everyone who was defending Obama, everything that he was doing, because you would say, he said he was going to end all these wars. He has a Nobel Peace Prize. Why is he starting wars? And people say, well, look at the mess Bush left him. They were still saying that 8 years, and all the way to the very end, they were saying that, look at the mess that Bush left him. So, like you say, Danny, this is something that they have always done, and it's just continuing. This is what we were trying to warn everybody about: continuity of agenda. Nothing was changing. And to be honest, if you listen to, just like you say, Danny, with and Angelo, with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, he literally told you what the whole plan was, and it's not for peace in Ukraine. It is to freeze it, put troops on the ground, create a buffer zone, just like they did in Syria, and pivot to China and start a bigger war. And I hear people talking about Trump trying to make peace in Ukraine and then redirect resources to China. And don't they hear themselves talking when they say that? What are you doing? Why are you pivoting to China? To do the exact same thing to China? They're not connecting the two together at all. They're not understanding that this is all just one big conflict. Russia, Iran, China, and everything in between and everything beyond. It is the U.S. clinging to its empire. Now, since we have been talking on and off about Ukraine, why not just get into Ukraine? A lot happened since the last time we did a live stream. And I just wanted to talk about this. There was this talk between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his counterparts or Ukrainian representatives in Jeddah. And they were talking about this ceasefire, right? And then he said, the ball is in Russia's court. Everybody heard that. And then everyone watched Kai Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen, Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, also said literally the exact same thing. And we have been warning about this since all throughout the 3 years of this war, that the U.S., if they cannot win, they're going to try to freeze it. They're going to try to create a buffer zone. They're going to try to maneuver Russia into a corner where they either have to pick to go to war with Europe or just accept what they have right now. That is exactly what we are watching right now. And the other thing I want to point out is this. We are hearing about the UK and France talking about putting troops on the ground in Ukraine. And we continuously hear people talk about how the UK and France and others in Europe, the Europeans in general, are trying to derail President Trump's peace process. And in reality, they are literally doing exactly what Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth told them to do in February. And I have it right here. This was Secretary Hegseth right here. Any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. And there must be a robust international oversight of the line of contact. So they're not talking about a lasting peace. They're talking about freezing it and creating a buffer zone using Western troops or tripwire force. And now you have Prime Minister Keir Starmer talking about troops on the ground, planes in the sky to secure the Ukraine peace deal. So this isn't the UK undermining President Trump. This is the UK doing exactly what they were told as part of Secretary Hegseth's Division of Labor directive. It is so plain and clear for all to see. And we remember Secretary Hegseth telling Europe, you need to spend more, you need to expand your arms industry. And then after a couple of weeks of theater, pretending that there was this huge fallout, this split forming between the US and Europe, every single European leader took turns, almost literally, like so this was Ursula von der Leyen announcing this huge plan to increase arms production and aid to Ukraine. And then this was the United Kingdom Secretary of State for Defense, John Healey. He literally says to Secretary Hegseth's face, right across the table, you challenged us to step up on Ukraine. So he's talking about that February 12th directive Secretary Hegseth gave on defense spending, on European security. And I say to you that we are, and we will further. And they're talking about how they have already made an unprecedented increase in defense spending in the UK. So I just, I don't understand how people are at this point are not seeing this. They saw Secretary Hegseth lay all of this out, and now they have watched Europe, like a checklist, one after the other, do literally verbatim what they were told to do. And somehow people are imagining this is a split, and somehow they're trying to undermine President Trump's peace process. There is no peace process. This is Minsk 3.0. And that is what they're trying to push on Russia. And I think Russia understands that. I think they see through it. And I think what they're doing is paying lip service to the West, giving them an exit ramp, whether they want to use it or not. And they are preparing to continue with the special military operation. Okay, so any you went, how about Rasheed and then Angelo?
When it comes to Europe, I think the West wants to bleed Russia. They want it in a weakened state. Remember, I said that they want to attack Iran, then they want to go take out China, then double back on Russia. In their minds, when they double back on Russia, they want it to be bled to death. They want Russia to have expended a lot of energy, economics, and blood, so that it'll be a little bit more easier for them to then enact their plans of balkanization of Russia. But the thing is, when you examine it, those in power in the West, they don't realize that they're not in the position that they were in 10, 20, 30 years ago, politically, geopolitically, or economically. And the clock is, again, we go back to time, the clock is ticking, and some of them understand that they don't have the luxury of time anymore. So they must put on, divide up the areas of responsibility. And to try to keep Russia pacified over here because they believe that America will eventually win against Iran. America will eventually subdue China, and maybe we can hold Europe long enough so that America can double back and beat Russia. That's the mind of exceptionalism. They're not looking at the reality on the ground or the reality in the economic sphere. When you have something akin to $666 trillion in U.S. debt that's not accounted for, they're not looking at the $5 to $6 quadrillion derivative market. They're not looking at the $37 trillion in open debt. They're not looking at the rise in poverty, unemployment, the dissatisfaction within America, the dissatisfaction within Europe. They're not looking at any of those things. They believe that if they can keep everybody divided, then they can suppress the masses of the people and then continue on with the empire so that they can keep the dollar. It's all about keeping the dollar as the main economic tool of commerce, because without that, not only does America lose, but Britain lose, and the EU loses, because the pound, the euro, and the dollar are all tied economically, and this project called the EU will collapse, and so the time is not with them, so they are now desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. What's rational to you, what's rational to Angelo, what's rational to Danny, is not rational to irrational people. So they're going to keep on because they believe that they have the might, they believe they have the right, and they believe that they pulled it off before, so they can pull it off again. And they're using the same tools of empire. They just don't know that the empire tricks no longer work, because the world is wising up, the world is rising up, and we're looking at a new paradigm that excludes a hegemon. We're looking at a new global paradigm that is coming into the works, that is talking about a more fairer, more just world. And in the eyes of America, in the eyes of Britain, this is unacceptable. And I believe that this is going to push more escalation in Yemen, because they want Iran. This goes back to what you talked about in Europe, but it's tied back to Iran, because they are trying to weaken all of the legs of the resistance. And Yemen is one. And they believe that if they can weaken the legs of the resistance, right, they then, think about this, if they subdue Yemen, then they have a clear path to Iran. Then if they can subdue Iran, they have all of the gas pipelines that they want to lay. They have all of and they can control all of that. And at the same time, blunt China's Belt and Road in West Asia. And then this also gives them more power when they face China, and then double back on Russia. All of this is interconnected, but the world is wising up. And I believe that the empire has bitten off more than it can chew, and they're going to lose a couple of teeth in Ukraine, and lose more than a couple of teeth in West Asia. So when they go against the dragon in Asia, they're going to be toothless. I believe so.
Well, one thing I want to jump in and say, because you made a very important point. The stated plan is to dismember Iran's arc of resistance, its network of allies in the region. And we have watched them do that from October 7th onward. Especially Angelo and I, we warned that was exactly what they were setting up, and that is exactly what they did. They used that and the instability that they created across the region to wipe out Hezbollah's senior leadership. They have completely collapsed Syria. They have turned it into a breeding ground of extremism they can export across the region and around the world, and that is exactly what they're preparing to do. And we just heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio complaining about the Uyghur extremists that were literally going from China through Southeast Asia to Turkey to join ISIS and Al-Qaeda, according to The Economist, and join a terrorist group still listed by his State Department as a foreign terrorist organization. So they're doing that. And if they get rid of Yemen, if they cut Yemen out, then Iran is completely isolated. That was always their plan. That is what they have said their plan is. And then think about what happens if you eliminate Iran from the region and there is no more arc of resistance. The U.S. exercises this tremendous power over the region. These nations no longer have any alternative. There are no dynamics in the region giving them any relief from U.S. coercion. And they can turn on and off the flow of hydrocarbons to China at will, and they can coerce these nations into lowering or raising energy prices, depending on what it is they're trying to do. So this is extremely dangerous what they're doing, but it's also very obvious what they're doing. And this is something that's, if there's a deep state, that is the deep state agenda. And that is an agenda President Trump is eagerly, obediently serving right now as we speak. Angelo.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I think Iran is a very important piece, especially on the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a big supplier, also a big partner for both Russia and China. It's essential. So when you're hitting Iran, you are going to hit directly China. And then additional to that, I mean, that's we mentioned that they want to pin down Russian troops, because keep in mind that Russian resources, even though they outmatch all European countries when it comes to the military-industrial complex, but they have limited resources. That's a matter of demographics. They cannot fight a similar front than they have in Ukraine. That's why they try to overextend Russia, and Russia didn't fall into the trap. So let's imagine if tomorrow there's a confrontation in the South China Sea, and there are several possible scenarios. We've seen that there was a coup in South Korea, and that was aimed at a direct confrontation between South Korea and North Korea. North Korea is de facto a Russian ally, and Russia and probably China would have to join that fight. So that's another extension too. And now we have also the Taiwan question. They're pushing the red lines, and we've seen these days. I don't know if you followed, but Duterte has been put in prison. That's not a coincidence. Duterte in the Philippines is the ex-president. He's the only opposition to Marcos, which Marcos, by the way, is a CIA asset. When his father was in power, he was working closely with the United States, and now he's shifting completely anti-China, and he's provoking China in the South China Sea. So you see, you have those alliances that are being prepared. What happened is that the US cannot actually be in Ukraine and fight on the South China Sea against China. So this is why they need this problem, the Ukrainian problem, to be EU problem. They are going to compensate in terms of increased military spending, and the US can focus on the South China Sea. If you really look at the budgets, remember Trump, they said Elon Musk too, we are going to lower the spending, there's lots of waste and so on. Well, just look at the program 2025. They are talking about doubling the US Navy. How are doubling the US Navy? It's I don't know, it's up to 2050, but it's a $40 billion a year of increase just for the Navy. Why are they doing that? It's very simple. That's all related to China. So it's about blockade, organizing a blockade on choke points around the world, and having a much stronger presence in South China Sea. So it's all linked. The only thing is that people they don't do the homework. They see what they want to see, but they don't realize that it's just a different approach. We've said it over and over. The Democrats, what they wanted to do was to go straight with Russia, and then we'll take care of China. The Republicans, Trump is from the Mersheimer school, who's actually trying to mitigate the relationship with Russia and focus exclusively on China, and then later go back to Russia, as Rasheed just mentioned before. So that's I think the topic will be once as this Ukrainian war is going to be handled by between the EU and Russia, and it's going to be it's going to be a butchery, and probably I don't see a confrontation, aggressive confrontation between the EU and Russia. They don't want to escalate. You see, it is about getting to the point of non-escalation to nuclear conflict, because when it becomes existential for Russia, we are talking about nuclear. So it is about really weakening Russia, and then the focus is going to be like really South China Sea, and this is why we slowly will have actually to really pay much closer attention to what is going to happen with China.
And We'll shift gears to talk about China specifically, but one last thing on Ukraine. People have to understand that fundamentally it is a U.S. proxy war against Russia using Ukraine, but also using Europe. And they're out of Ukrainians. So now they're trying to figure out a way to start feeding Europeans into the war. Just as you say, though, Angela, they don't want a nuclear exchange. They just want to keep the proxy war going. They need to find more meat, and they need to find more metal for their weapons and their vehicles and their ammunition. So this is what they're doing. And if they can freeze it and build out these capabilities, just like they did with Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, if they could do that with what is Minsk 3, whether they want to say it or not, or whether they want to pretend that it isn't, it is, that is what they're trying to do. Now, let's shift gears to China. I was just talking about this one right here. This is the second time Secretary Rubio has brought up these Uyghurs that were held here in Thailand, where I am based. These Uyghurs are part of a network of extremists that were brought out of China through Southeast Asia to Turkey. They crossed into Syria, where they were joining ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And this is according to The Economist and the Western media. And they are joining terrorist organizations, not because I call them terrorist organizations, because the U.S. itself, Marco Rubio's State Department, calls them terrorists. And so what he's doing is he's talking about China pressuring Thailand to send these Uyghur suspects back to China. This same network bombed Bangkok in 2015, a Buddhist shrine in downtown Bangkok, killing 20 people. A horrific terrorist attack. All of these people were 100% innocent. They were just ordinary people, tourists, and people just working, trying to make a living, and they killed these people. And so you don't have to pressure Thailand to send these people back to China. The problem is the U.S. is pressuring Thailand to allow these extremists to travel on, because what they are doing is there's already a U.S. war against China. It's already happening. It's been happening. It has transcended the Obama, Trump, Biden, and now second Trump administration. They have these extremist networks, including the Uyghurs, but also separatists in Baluchistan, separatists and terrorists in Myanmar, who are attacking Chinese engineers, Chinese infrastructure, Belt and Road Initiative projects, and even attempting to kill Chinese diplomats as they're traveling to these different countries. And so that is already ongoing. It's just a matter of the U.S. slowly turning up the temperature, not too fast, just like you say, Angela. They don't want a direct confrontation. But what they are doing, this was a great post too. Let's take a look at this one. Remember President Trump accusing China of controlling the Panama Canal because there was a Hong Kong-based company that owned ports at either end of the canal. Well, BlackRock, the deep state, gave a phone call to President Trump and said, help us take over these ports. And so that's what he did. And so BlackRock takes over these ports. They coerce this company in Hong Kong to sell it. And the U.S. is literally doing what they're accusing China of doing, having these private companies that the government somehow is controlling and using to advance their foreign policy. That is literally what the Trump administration is doing hand in hand with BlackRock. So again, all of the signs are there of what Trump really is and what he is really doing, the continuity of agenda of it all. And Angelo, so what you had said earlier, the Panama Canal, what is it? It's a maritime choke point. Greenland, right there with the northern route, another choke point. They're already building up their military in the South China Sea, another choke point. That is what the U.S. is doing. They cannot fight China head on. They know that. So they're going to try to cut the Chinese economy off through maritime routes, through terrorism, attacking the Belt and Road Initiative over land, and by targeting, destabilizing, seizing, and controlling the Middle East, this source of hydrocarbons so essential for the Chinese economy. That is what is taking shape here. And all of these are just parts of the puzzle. Danny, go ahead. What has been on your radar in regards to the Trump administration vis-a-vis China?
Well, I hope people understand that everything you just said, Brian, really does reek of not only desperation, but waste. And all of this talk about peace through strength, if there isn't a reversal of these policies, the opposite of what Trump is actually doing, then what you actually get is not strength and definitely not peace. What you get is the United States literally taking a hammer under Trump to the global economy. Because, Brian, one thing you didn't mention also is tariffs. These tariffs that Trump conveniently kept on China, but continuously has avoided on everybody else he's threatened, right? He's, I'm going to tariff the EU, I'm going to tariff Canada, I'm going to tariff Mexico. Constantly takes them back because he knows if he places tariffs on every single sphere, both of US influence and of China's influence, then what ends up happening is that the fragility, the already fragile, and Rasheed, you mentioned the debt, you mentioned BlackRock, Brian. We are talking about a fragile global financial system dominated by US-led Wall Street institutions, which are literally hanging on by a thread of their fiat, completely an utterly wasteful money printing economy that all it does is reproduces money and wealth for itself. This entire military objective that the United States has with China is about preserving and strengthening that crippling and absolutely redundant and wasteful financial system. So that is what this is all about, as you said, Brian. And all of the politics, all of the atrocity propaganda that Rubio is trying to promote with the Uyghurs in Thailand is very ironic, given that one, Uyghurs who do not want to go back to China if they are fighting in this terrorist area, because they would rightfully be brought to justice because of their connections to actual crimes that they are linked to and committed for over 15 plus years prior to 2016. That is what Rubio is actually afraid of. He doesn't want to see actual terrorists, people who are proxies, be brought to justice, because that would upend the entire U.S. foreign policy regime, which relies on forces like these to create chaos, and the chaos necessary to, as you said, Brian, thwart China's development process, China's influence worldwide, China's rise. This is what it's all about. But make no mistake, everyone should understand that this not only does it not work, but it's completely counterproductive to any kind of hope for a more peaceful world and for a world where there is more, as China says, common prosperity. All of this is about making the tiny few elites who head up this Wall Street regime more prosperous at the expense of everyone else. And that is what targeting China is really all about. China has a different model, a different path it is pursuing. All of Donald Trump's economic policies toward China, all of the fact sheets that he has released, his administration, is all about decoupling and trying to isolate China. And all that does is damage the U.S. economy further, because the U.S. Capitalist economy cannot sustain itself without trade and cooperation with China. But furthermore, by attempting to sever the world from China, the United States actually severs itself from the world. And that is what Donald Trump is actually accelerating. It's already backfiring. The U.S. economy is in complete and utter shambles right now. It will eventually backfire on the Trump administration politically once people start to get a whiff of this and the next election cycle comes up in less than 2 years. So this is all very much part of what is a crumbling empire, and one that is attempting to just kick and flail and do whatever it can using all of the tools, economic, political, military, and otherwise, to keep itself standing up. But actually what's going to happen through all of this, because China, whether what they're doing in the South China Sea or the Panama Canal, China has no shortage of friends. It has no shortage of tools. It has all of the capacity to maneuver around, survive, and actually continue to thrive despite these conditions. It's going to be the United States that feels the pain from all of this first and foremost. And I hope that all of the people who said, oh, Trump is going to make America great again, he's doing peace through strength, everything is going to get better, we have so much hope for peace. I hope people understand that the consequences are already being felt, and they're only going to get more dire, and it's going to hit us far more than it's going to hit China, and it's going to create all kinds of problems worldwide, which people in the United States will be feeling very soon. So that is what I'm keeping my radar on, because truthfully, I'm not surprised. I believe that Donald Trump from the very beginning was always going to ratchet up on China. This is what he did in his first administration. Then Biden continued and escalated that. This is the ultimate objective. This is the existential crisis of the United States' time as a hegemon, as an empire. It sees China as almost a new Soviet Union, except this time China is stronger than the Soviet Union, far more balanced, far more capable, far more prosperous, and far more able to maneuver the international scene than what was occurring during the Cold War. So truthfully, China is seen as the graveyard of the United States as a world power. And it should be, because the United States can't maneuver under its current arrangement. People in the United States, though, should be asking the question, what do we need to do so we have an economic and political arrangement that doesn't see it this way? Because it doesn't need to be seen this way. It's truthfully not this way. China does not want to destroy the United States. China would be very happy for the United States to be prosperous and doing well on its own, and to compete and to cooperate as a normal country. That is what we should be pursuing here. And Donald Trump is certainly not the answer. He's exactly the problem.
And well, I just want to bring up the tariffs. You mentioned tariffs. I believe that the tariffs really are just a way to decouple from China. They know it's going to destroy the U.S. economy. They don't care. And I think they understand that there is no graceful way to do this. They're going to have to burn everything down. And they hope that they'll be able to build more efficiently in the ashes than everybody else. They hope to knock out even more than they themselves will suffer. And Daddy, you were talking about this line that I hear a lot of Trump supporters using: peace through strength. The U.S. has not been at peace for a single day in the entire 21st century. Not even a single day has the U.S. been at peace with the rest of the world, including every single day of this second Trump administration. Peace through strength is just a way of rebranding American primacy around the globe. And people need to stop saying this. President Trump himself, even all of his rhetoric, if you just listen to it carefully, he's not talking about peace. He's talking about primacy. The U.S. will never, with this system, Danny, you're talking about the system in the United States. With this system in place, they will never pick peace over primacy. That was the first clue that Trump was lying to everybody during his campaign. The second clue was people like J.D. Vance just openly saying, well, we're not really interested in fighting this war in Ukraine. Dump it on the Europeans and let's go to war. We need these weapons to fight China. He literally said that. So I don't get where everybody got this idea that he wanted peace. He wants to make America strong at home so everyone leaves us alone. You got an ocean on both sides of either coast. There is nothing the U.S. actually has to worry about. So when they're talking about maintaining this military, building up their fleet, it's an admission that they want to continue military aggression all around the globe. And I just wanted to point this out because I have people saying, well, Brian, maybe the Uyghurs are extremists, but that maybe that's because the Chinese are abusing them. There's no evidence at all. There isn't a single photo or video of China abusing the Uyghurs in China. The only evidence that exists of anyone torturing or killing Uyghurs is the United States. The U.S. admitted they were bombing them, carpet bombing them in Afghanistan. This is NBC News. U.S. targets Chinese Uyghur militants. They were carpet bombing them. Record-breaking bomb drops from a B-52. This is what they were bragging about back in 2018. And then they were torturing them in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, this U.S. base there. So every accusation against China is a confession by the United States. I think it's safe to say that. Let's go to Rasheed and then Angelo. Just some closing thoughts about this what we are watching right now. This, I would say, quicker than expected unraveling of this veneer of the peace president. He's going to undo everything the Biden administration does. And now we're just watching him double down on all of it. Rasheed and then Angelo.
Well, if he is the peace president and he is going to undo what Biden has done, then why has he strengthened the Federal Reserve with his policies that he's enacted? this is counterproductive to the hundreds of millions of people in America and around the globe to strengthen a private bank that makes policy for the United States. Also, I want to bring something up. You were talking about the hypocrisy of America. I want to go back to that for a minute. I want to bring something up that is absolutely in line with what you were saying. There's an article on RT, and they were talking about Trump launches powerful military action against the Houthis. And down in the article, it says the president has also warned Iran against providing any support to the Yemeni-based group or threatening the U.S. Support for the Houthi terrorists must end immediately, he wrote, adding that the U.S. would otherwise hold Iran fully accountable, and we won't be nice about it. So America does not want anyone to be allied with anyone outside of her. She can give all of her allies missiles, bombs, planes, rockets, ships, and everything else, but you're not supposed to give your friend, your brother, your sister a rock or a slingshot to defend themselves. And if you do, then it's in violation, and that because it's an affront to American hegemony and supremacy, then we have the right to bomb or interdict. Russia could use that same logic against NATO and the United States. China could use that same logic against the United States with the Senkaku or the Diaoyu Islands and Taiwan. So this is that exceptional mind state. And when we're talking about Donald Trump and the unraveling of the empire, I think a lot of people miss this part too. They think that Trump is cleaning out government and he's reducing big government, and they don't realize that he is removing any obstacle to war. If you look at all of the different positions in all of the different areas of government, he is putting into place people who will back him regardless. And I believe that this is a precursor to war, because if we look at the economic situation, as I go back to, and it's unraveling at breakneck speed. If you have a defense secretary that is gung-ho, that is a crusader and all of this, and then you put these other people in position that that are pro-Trump, pro-MAGA, then when the people riot in the streets, they will have your back to suppress the masses so that you continue on your war escapades to try to maintain hegemony, even against the will of your own people. This is a sign of approaching dictatorship in a certain term. And I think that gets missed when people are talking too, because they are not looking at the economics of it. You got to go back. Without the economics, you can't see the clearer picture. Think about 37 trillion in debt. Your deficit spending. You have at least $666 trillion in debt. And you have a $5 to $7 quadrillion derivative market. You're not producing anything but dollars, movies, and weapons that don't work. You cannot compete with Vietnam. You cannot compete with China. You cannot compete in Asia. And now you cannot even compete with some of Africa, because Africa has become a manufacturing hub for China. So when you're looking at the landscape of things and everything that you once dominated in, you're no longer dominating in, and you're the ship that continues to take on debt. And you don't think rational, because death awaits you. And so what you're doing, instead of getting the life jacket on, you're putting the bell around your neck and jumping in the water, sinking. And that's what the American government is doing right now. And I don't think that people are realizing that Trump is setting this up strategically. He talks a lot, but look at his moves with the people that he's putting in strategic places, so that if the economy collapses before he gets to China, he'll have the people there to suppress the masses. Or if the people rise up as they push for global war and as they push for war after war after war, he has the people there to suppress the people. And he is undoing the educational system. God forbid, they do need to do something with the educational system, but not in the manner that he's doing. He just fired people from the public broadcasting with America funds, so he's putting in more people. This is to push his narrative and his agenda. And I'm not anti-Trump. I'm not pro-Trump. I'm apolitical. And I think anybody who's seen my shows know that I was this hard against Obama and Biden too. But I'm going to call an ace and a spade. And I believe that this has all the makings of fascist dictatorial government ahead, because when the economy collapses, it's going to be deadly. Gregory Mannarino says that the debt burden will be almost as if a nuclear bomb exploded, and it will cause the mass loss of life. And I think they're preparing for that, because just like you and I know, just like Danny knows, just like Angelo knows, they have inside figures that we didn't see. And so no matter how bad we think it is, they have information to know that it's worse than what we think it is. So they're putting everything in position for the eventual wars and the eventual economic collapse. And I think that this will be the unraveling of America. And I have to say this one last thing. With the government doing what they're doing, antagonizing nation after nation, it seems to me common sense says stop the antagonizing of the nations, because if you stop, maybe in your downfall, the people will have compassion and pity on you. But the more you antagonize people, the more they're going to wish and hope for, and then have joy in your downfall. And I think that because of the exceptionalism, the leadership can't see that, and I believe that this will be another reason for the fall of the American empire.
One thing real quick, Danny, you said at the 1 hour mark, are you still okay?
Yeah, I can stay for about another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. I just want to, because Rasheed brought up a really important point. This is what I hear all the time. But Brian, Trump destroyed USAID. He got rid of NED. Look, he just annihilated Voice of America. No, he didn't. I warned people about this. I warned them about Doge. I said, this is not about dismantling anything. This is about streamlining and sharpening it. And that is exactly what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said. He said, we didn't get rid of USAID. We cut off all the fat. We still got 1,000 programs that we are going to fund, and we're going to put it right under the State Department. Just like you said, Rasheed, they're consolidating control over it. They're making these tools easier to wield, streamlining them, sharpening them, making them easier to wield. So that doesn't really sound at all like dismantling anything to me. I mean, literally, there's 1,000 programs they admit are still operational right now. And I was warning people, because I'm tracking specific organizations here in Southeast Asia. None of them, not even one of them, was disrupted by all of these supposed funding freezes. They are still all operational. They were still organizing protests in the street to destabilize things here. They're still backing a vicious war in Myanmar to divide and destroy that country like they did Libya and Syria. And so no, they're not dismantling anything. And it's extremely dangerous for people out there to buy into this and to continuously repeat it when it is demonstrably not true. Right here, 5,200 programs out of 6,200. If you do the math, it's 1,000 programs still operational. Do you think all of those 1,000 programs are just humanitarian programs? Because USAID was created specifically to interfere abroad. There are no humanitarian programs. Even the ones that look humanitarian are designed to influence, coerce, and control. Angelo, what are your thoughts on this? Some closing thoughts, and then we will do questions. And knowing that if you don't want to stick around, it's okay. I could do the questions, no problem. Angelo,
I can manage another 10, 15 minutes. There's so many very interesting topics. I would advise people to check the video that Danny did with Michael Hudson when you want to look at the US dollar hegemony. It's a very important topic. That's the center. It's all about the money. And when you look at the collapsing of empire, that's where they're holding these onto power is by having their currency and by having a strong army. And when you look at throughout history, the British Empire was exactly the same. They imposed upon the world the currency. Now, going back to what Rasheed said, it's really important. I'm not also ideologically driven, but when you look at what the internal politics they're doing in the US is all about also divide and control thing. So you end up having people that actually are worshipping the elites, the 1%. And the real enemies, people, it's very interesting to see like people, they are for the US empire. The MAGA, they actually back the US empire because they do think that this is going to make America stronger and the American people stronger too. And what they don't realize that the biggest enemies they have, because it's a class struggle, is the 1%. So what China has, India has, and Russia has as an enemy is the same as American people have as an enemy, is the oligarch. And now going back to internal politics, it's important people don't see the full picture. They are selective on what they want to see. There is some saving, of course, there was some waste, but ultimately this is a power grab. It's a power grab, but at the same time, when you look at Doge is a project to actually get, hold onto those, onto everything. This is, it's a dystopian. They are going to build up a dystopian society, and ultimately it's about privatization. When you are talking about privatization, those are state-owned assets, and they are who's going to take advantage of that? It's all the oligarch. And when you look at the background of those people, there's Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, he was funded by the CIA. Palantir was funded by the CIA. He's behind Zuckerberg. He was the first investor of Zuckerberg. And he's the co-founder of PayPal with Elon Musk. Elon Musk, military-industrial complex. And this is what people are cheering for. It's never been so much the billionaires in charge. And what I look average Joe, blue collar, who's starving, and is actually cherishing billionaires. It's just absurd. But the problem is that they have, it's how they present the narrative and how much people don't do their homework. They don't realize that actually this is a power grab, and it's going to be extremely aggressive. We are talking about, now with the AI and with all those big tech joining forces together, it's over. It is over. There's not much you can do. And in reality, what American people should do is really like doing introspections and not fighting, supporting those. I see those MAGA being proud. Oh, we have a strong military. We need to use, well, no. The people that are leading you towards war are going to use you as a cannon fodder, and it is going to come out of your pocket, and they are going to be richer. And you can look at every time all those leaders, in the US, they get into power, either in the Congress or as president, they become much richer. And they say, oh, well, Trump, he could be playing golf and he could be retiring and so on. Well, guess what? What has he done that has made him much richer? Through social, he made billions of dollars. He did a scam coin. A meme coin where he actually cheated out of billions of dollars, the same as Milei did in Argentina. And those people, the MAGA people, they're closing an eye on that because it's convenient. No, sorry. You know what? You can be MAGA. I have no problem with that. You want to be MAGA, because you despise Biden. There's a few things. Okay, that's ideology. But be fair. He cheats people out of billions of dollars on what they call a shit coin. Well, you have to call him out, because if you don't, you are part of a cult.
And someone is pointing out here, Bessie is pointing out, Scott Besson, who's the Secretary of the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury. He was a partner at the Soros Fund Management. So we're always hearing about MAGA saying Soros is the root of all evil, and he picks like the right hand of Soros to be in his administration. And I'm sure it has is 5D chess that's just going right over my head. But to me, it looks a lot like continuity of agenda. It looks like the same interests, different people, albeit different people, but the exact same interests from one administration to the next. I always point this out. I always warn people about the cabinet picks. Before they even step foot into office, I warn people. I did it for Obama, Trump during his first administration. Before he stepped foot, I said he's going to fill his cabinet up with swamp monsters, and it's going to be continuity of agenda. That is exactly what happened, because that's what you look at. You look at the people he surrounds himself with. All of these theories that he was going to keep them on short leashes. America's 300 million people. Don't tell me those are the only people he can find, and don't tell me he needs to get them through confirmation and then he'll keep tabs on them. He obviously isn't. Look at Rubio right now, an unrepentant, unleashed neocon doing exactly what neocons do: lie, cheat, justify war, interference, coercion worldwide, every corner of the world, meddling in it, which is what Trump supporters were trying to vote out of office. And what they ended up with is just as bad as what they were voting against. Thank you, Pessy, for that. That's a good. I always forget that one. It's so ridiculous and so obvious. Let's do some of the questions, Danny. If you want, anytime, or anyone that needs to leave, no worries. You're still welcome to come back next week. No worries at all. Let's do the questions. Let's just throw them right up here. Do you foresee Europe centralizing military power at EU level in order to enforce compliance with EU policies on member states to take control of electoral outcomes? I don't really think they need to do that, because the EU already is a layer that has been imposed upon the sovereignty of individual European states. Angelo has always talked about how this was a CIA project. It was meant to politically capture and control Europe since the end of World War II. That has been the process that has been taking place. I believe it has culminated to where Europe really is incapable of exercising sovereignty. You just have a couple of anomalies in these smaller countries that create problems, but not really impeding anything. I mean, Hungary, I think they just voted. They withheld their veto. They could have vetoed it. They didn't. You know what I mean? I don't think they need to do anything extreme like that. Anyone that wants to can jump in on any of these.
I'll just say that I believe that the model for Europe, actually, what's more important than this is turning Europe into the US's model. I believe this has been the aim for many, many decades. This is why the European Union was actually championed by subsequent US administrations. It was to turn Europe economically and politically into a US vassal, which is very, very clear given what happened to Nord Stream and given what we know about the strategy of the United States since the Gorbachev era, essentially, when the United States was trying to facilitate the complete collapse of the Soviet Union. It was to keep Europe down. And the only way Europe can be completely down is if its economy attempts and its politics attempts to mirror the United States's, because there isn't any room for another kind of United States. The United States, with its complete and utter reliance on Wall Street and the Pentagon, this is a model that can't be repeated because the U.S. is the hegemon. It is the one that dominates these institutions. And so Europe following along this path only leads them further under the thumb of these institutions, which then leads them further under the thumb of U.S. foreign policy. So that really is the plan here, no matter what form it takes, no matter if it looks like Trump is bullying Europe more than usual rhetorically. The ultimate agenda is the same. It's to ensure that Europe does not have any strategic, political, geopolitical, economic sovereignty whatsoever. And that's why all of this militarization will end up further facilitating the destruction of Europe's economies, which has already been happening. And it will create social tensions and chaos and divisions and fractures and fragments that make it so it's so much easier to control. And I believe that's what the United States ultimately wants in the end. And it, unlike all of the other topics we've talked about, even Yemen or China, Russia, Europe, it's a lot easier to do this because they already are politically captured to a large extent.
And to add to that point, Danny, people who think that Europe is somehow splitting off from the U.S. and they're interfering in the peace plan with Russia, how does any of this proxy war with Ukraine benefit Europe? It is destroying their economy. There's not even one conceivable way any of them benefit from this conflict, except maybe the arms industry. But the arms industry is connected to the hip with the U.S. arms industry. So really, this is just the U.S. benefiting from this at the expense of Europe. I mean, look at Germany and even their special interests, the big industry in Germany. got vetoed. They don't get a vote. They don't get to have a say. Their cheap energy coming from Russia has been completely cut off. So this is what I'm trying to explain to people. This is something we all repeat over and over again. Follow the money. All right, let's keep going. Actually, there's a lot of questions this week. This isn't really a question, but well, it kind of is a question. They're talking about bioweapons tuned to genetic clusters, races. Doesn't this freak everyone out? Yet crickets from leaders. But actually, that's not entirely true. I saw this at the beginning. Do people remember this? This neocon project for the new American century, and they had this paper titled "Rebuilding America's Defenses." And right down here, they talk about advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare from the realm of terror to a potentially useful tool. Who talks like that except someone who would actually produce and use a weapon like this? No, this is very real. Christian Rescue here is not imagining this. This is real. This is something that they have been working on all along. I have no idea the progress they've made. If you're wondering why there's bioweapons all over Ukraine collecting Slavic genetic material, that might be your answer. And they have labs like this here in Asia. Also, the U.S. government, the U.S. military has, I think they have a lab here in Thailand doing exactly this. So it's very worrying. And this is something that I would love to talk about, but you can see how much the four of us have to struggle just to convince you that President Trump is a lying politician, just like everyone else in Washington. If that, and we have to work so hard to explain this to people, how are we going to talk about genospecific bioweapons? But thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Let's see. Not a question, just want to say how disappointed I am with Trump. So quickly going rabid like this. I was at least hoping for a honeymoon period. I see a lot of people making this comment. This is important to accept that this is not working out the way you wanted and just face the truth. That takes a lot of courage to do it. It takes a lot of courage to admit maybe you were wrong, but not really. You wanted to hope for something better. You didn't do anything. They did. The people you invested hope in violated that, broke that trust, that hope, that support you placed in them. It's on them. It's not on you. So you don't owe them anything. Just speak up about it. Hold them accountable. Okay, the Ansar Allah, which people refer to as the Houthis, can they strike back? Well, I mean, this all remains to be seen. Can they strike at U.S. warships and sink them? They haven't yet. Can they? This remains to be seen. These are the advancement of military technology and its proliferation all around the world is leveling the playing field. It really is. And it is only a matter of time before this happens. But will it happen with Ansar Allah in Yemen and this conflict with the U.S.? I don't know. Let's see.
Well, I'll just add that let me, because I will head out after this.
Sure.
In terms of that question, I believe, I think it's clear that Ansar Allah they have the capability. I mean, they have hypersonic missiles. They've launched them at Israel. Whether they hit or not, whether Ansar Allah wants to escalate in this major way and create a permanent war situation, which the United States is more than willing to embroil itself in. First of all, if Yemen were to hit a U.S. destroyer with a hypersonic missile, the United States has no choice, given its rabid warmongering foreign policy regime, but to continue to escalate. So obviously, Ansar Allah will be making calculations as to whether it is worth that trouble. I mean, there will be a response. And part of the reason why there will be a response is because it's the United States here is, in Yemen's eyes, is doing the bidding of Israel, which the reason why Yemen is even in the fold is because of this horrific blockade that is an extension of the horrific genocide, and the blockade is ongoing, which Yemen will not see. So Yemen will continue naval operations. I believe they already said they're going to continue to blockade Israeli and Israeli-linked vessels. So that's not going to stop. So already there's a consequence, but Yemen will likely launch a military operation. How big it will be, whether it will sink a U.S. ship, that the fact that we even asking that question though indicates that Donald Trump is really rolling the dice here, because Donald Trump's administration cannot afford to become embroiled in a permanent war in West Asia. But that's exactly the path that he is running toward right now at a very fast pace. And he's going to have to depend on Ansar Allah's calculations and whether they deem it necessary for the civilian population in particular to withstand this kind of response. Because from the beginning, Ansar Allah, just like Iran, just like any other part of the Axis resistance, has been calculating what are the necessary escalatory steps that both minimize the damage to the civilian populations and people while maximizing the impact. So as you said, Brian, we'll see, but there will be something down the way militarily coming from Ansar Allah, because they have no choice in the matter. Whether it sinks a ship is another question, but it will be significant, and it will, it'll create a big dilemma for Donald Trump, one of his own making, and no one should feel bad about him for. Everyone should be infuriated with him and infuriated with this U.S. Political and military regime, which is causing just unnecessary devastation.
Hey, Dan,
yeah.
Megatron on Twitter, he has something out. He says the Houthis targeted the USS Harry Truman in the Red Sea after the bombardment of Yemen. Initial unconfirmed reports of a direct hit on a Yemeni missile on the U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Harry S. Truman in the Red Sea. This is reported by local Arab sources and even by Israeli sources, but right now there is no confirmation. Other sources mention damage to the carrier, possibly due to a missile being intercepted at the last second, but not a direct hit.
Right. Well, thanks, Rasheed. Yeah, no, I think I saw that, and so it's unclear, but there will be more of that coming. But unfortunately, I do have to go. I'm actually streaming in 2.5 hours with Mohammed Marandi on Yemen. So
yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, be sure everybody you can come on to that after you're done here. But thanks so much for having me, guys, and take care. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, Danny.
Bye.
Okay, let's get and anyone else. If I'm not going to force you to stay here, this is the question, so don't worry. Let's see here. Okay, the 800 billion allocation by the EU. This is part of their rearm program. Our heads got really gigantic there when Danny left. Through private military companies, it's contracts, hiring foreign immigrants to fulfill policing manpower needs. Look, I don't know. One point that I heard Alexander Maciuras bring up, and he's absolutely right. None of this is going to happen overnight. This is why I am saying they are trying to freeze this conflict. They are obviously trying to openly pressuring Russia into a ceasefire that they can get to stick and then expand and take advantage of, exploit, so that they can buy time to do all of this. Because we already have talked for 3 years straight about the Western military-industrial base and how it's incapable of catching up, narrowing this divide between themselves and just Russia, let alone China. So whatever it is that they're planning on doing, I wouldn't expect it to be done well or quickly.
Yeah,
probably.
Right. Yeah. There's a lag time actually. First of all, they need to change the laws in the EU. You have very strict laws when it comes to spending, especially when it comes to, you can have a maximum deficit of 3% of your GDP. So that would increase the threshold. So they need to change laws. But in addition to that, you know very well how it works when it comes to increasing military spending. Well, it's not like it's going to take time. You need to build up capacity. You need to build up a factory. You need actually to train people. A lot of things that, a lot of professions, engineers and so on, they're not there in the market. You need to train them. This is going to build up this whole military that they want to do in Europe. It's going to take years. And what is interesting is that you've seen when I listen to Trump, what he's saying, he's actually threatening Russia of more sanctions. The same as von der Leyen. They were saying, "Oh, we are going to destroy Russian economy and so on." But guess what? Everything they could throw at Russia, they've thrown it. You cannot sanction anything anymore. The only thing you can sanction are marginal things. I mean, you want to sanction cigarettes? And you think that if you sanction cigarettes in Russia, Russia is going to lose Well, this is the point. This is how absurd it is. The only thing is the difference with Trump is that he has a big mouth. He talks loud and he flexes muscles, but he doesn't have anything to back up. And ultimately, the cards on Putin's hands. People don't realize, but why the West is calling for a stop in a freeze, 30 days of freezing the conflict, because they're losing. And guess what? Do you think for a second that if Russia was losing, that Trump would ask for peace with Russia? He would double down. The only thing is that they need to actually have a narrative that is actually on their favor. And the last thing he wants is really to be the one that losing that war. So it's going to be a shifting blame. He wants to put probably Russia in a position where you give an offer to Russia that they cannot accept. It's just ridiculous. And then he has a good excuse to step out. He say, well, you know what? I did. I'm Gandhi. I'm a man of peace. They didn't want to make peace. I just live it. And ultimately, you'll end up like selling weapons to the EU. So he's winning on all fronts, actually. Saving face, getting the EU to be cannon fodder, getting them to spend extra money, which is going to be spent in US weapons, not EU weapons. You know who's spending the most right now in the EU? Eastern countries, especially Poland. And we need to pay really a close attention to Poland. Poland is spending 5% of its GDP on defense, and they're building a huge army. Poland is going to take over as being the largest army in Europe. We need to pay close attention. And Poland is de facto a US proxy. And so I wouldn't be surprised that Poland takes over the position of Ukraine as a second front.
Anything is possible. Also, I mean, a lot of people have been considering the Baltic nations the next ones, fed into the wood chipper. So I mean, we just have to wait and see. And there's a couple of questions here about will the British and French really send troops? But hold on, let's just do it in order here. Which state actors benefit most from an Iran-U.S. conflict? The U.S. The U.S. is ultimately at the center of all of this. People imagine that Israel is somehow benefiting from all of this, somehow that they this tiny country. Yes, they spend a lot on lobbying, but what people always do, they're always adding up all the money AIPAC is spending. And they don't look at how much money just Raytheon, Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, all these weapons manufacturers, just them alone, they spend way more than Israel does. And then there's other special interests like big ag, big pharma, big oil. So there's the auto industry. All of these special interests are giving politicians, and if you add it up, the largest group of donors are US-based gigantic corporations, financial institutions, and they're the ones that want to dominate the world. They have an economic model that is predicated on constant expansion and monopoly. And so this is what they're doing, and they're doing it at the barrel of a gun all around the planet. So they are the ones who are going to benefit because, as Rasheed points out, Iran is, the next weak link. They got Syria, they're going after Yemen, Iran is next, and then they have to pick Russia or China. And I don't think that it's set. I think they just look at the situation at the time, which one is more viable, and that is what they're doing. So it is the U.S. who benefits. Hold on. There's a lot of kind of duplicate questions here. Okay, so again, this is about So what is the overarching strategy? No rivals has always been the U.S. strategy since before the World Wars, since after the World Wars. American primacy over the entire planet. No rivals allowed. China not allowed to rise. Russia not allowed to rise. Iran not allowed to rise. Europe, not allowed to have an independent foreign policy. Canada, Australia, not allowed. No one's allowed. The U.S. runs the entire show. It is global empire. That is the overarching strategy.
By the way, Brian, we saw it with Japan. Remember in 1987, Japan was about to surpass U.S. economy, and that's when actually they started smashing. In the U.S., they were smashing like Japanese TVs and so on, and actually the pressure Japan to to manipulate its currency, and they made actually Japan non-competitive. It was what we call the Plaza Accord, and that's how they had those lost decades of for the Japanese economy because they didn't want Japan to surpass the US. So even the allies, they will never allow an ally like, let's say, Germany, just to be too powerful. They need to, they are going to support them up to a certain level, but if it becomes a threat in their dominance, in their hegemony, then they are going to, they're willing to destroy even their allies.
They don't have any allies. They only have victims. They're
not. Actually, what they do is, in reality, they hijack the democracies because they put in place, they pre-select the leaders of those countries, and ultimately those leaders, they work for the US, not for their countries. We saw Macron. We mentioned this just before. Well, Macron was actually selected by the American-French Foundation. Of course, he comes from the Rothschild Bank. You have all this globalist background and so on. But when you look at the French-American Foundation, the single purpose is to advance US interests in the world. So basically, he's a fellow of this organization. He becomes president, and de facto, you are advancing US agenda. So when Macron pretends, the US is actually going against us, that's just a clown show. It's a clown show because ultimately you saw there was a combined effort. They were all in sync when they sent that tweet, all those tweets. The ball is on Russia's side. Everybody, they were all tweeting the same message. Hey, do you think for a second that now, there are tensions between the EU and the US? No, it's just the surface. They want to make their people to feel that the US is going against EU interest, or or EU is left alone, and that's a good excuse to increase military spending. So it's just a clown show. But the problem is that people, they buy into those clown shows. We need to look at really the long term. And they're very good actors. It can be very counterintuitive. You see like this whole thing, like this drama thing about Zelensky and so on. But ultimately, you see a few days later, Zelensky is back and he's doing what he's supposed to do, work for the US. Do you think for a second he's working for Ukraine? And actually, just think, if you really analyze what happened, Zelensky, by having a tough stance with Trump, he goes back to Ukraine. That's a bonus for him, because he says to his people, "I was tough with that's what he says." And actually, he's got the backing of the ultra right, all those neo Nazis, that want him to be firm. That's a clown show.
And he's literally an actor, and so is President Trump to a certain extent.
By the way, Macron was also an actor. People forget, but Macron, he met his wife or his husband, whatever you want to believe. He was. Sorry for the joke. It's late. It's Sunday night. It's late. She was his drama teacher. Trudeau, do you know that Trudeau was actually, he started being an actor? I mean, those guys are just actors, and that's what they do. There's a formal power and informal power. People on the front, it's not the one that with the real power. Even Trump, I would say there are probably much stronger forces behind Trump. You don't get to that level if you're not backed by very, very strong people. So whoever is on the front, they're just clowns. The only exceptions, really, when you look at the very difference, Putin and Xi Jinping, it's what we call meritocracy. They get to that level because they are the best, by far the best, and they have the real power. They do.
Yes, and you can tell when they're talking that they actually know what's going on, and then you hear President Trump talking about how Spain is a BRICS man. Maybe he thinks Spain is the S in BRICS or something. No.
I mean,
honestly, we all know what the BRICS countries are, but he's president, he doesn't know.
No.
That's embarrassing.
Trump is from the real estate industry, and he thought that bricks was a construction material.
Probably. I mean, it's almost as bad. It's almost as bad.
I know it's bad. It's bad,
Okay. I think this is a good question, although it's not something we really talked about. But why isn't Thailand kicking all NGOs out of Thailand? This is a good question. I get it all the time. I do see countries that try to do this, even big countries like Russia and China. When they kick the NED out, they kick Open Society out, they uproot the BBC or Facebook or Google, and you see all the consequences. The US has a wide array of punishments that it will deal out if this happens, and they will do it to the entire country collectively, and they will also do it to politicians individually. And say in Thailand, where the elections goes back and forth between US proxies and people who are very prone to basically worshiping the West, and people that actually are invested in Thailand's national interests. And these kind of westernized politicians, the biggest fear in their little world is the US and Europe not letting them go on vacation to the West. And so that resonates with them, and they're willing to look the other way. Look at Bangladesh. I cannot remember what her name was, but she was kicked out by an NED funded color revolution. And if you look at it over the years, she was well aware of it. And she didn't do anything about it because she didn't want to upset the apple cart. She didn't want to make the West angry at her. She wanted to fit in. And then by the time she realized that the West does not have a place for her at the table, not now, not ever, was never going to let her sit at the table or even under the table, she was already on a helicopter flying to India because she got kicked out by the US. So this is the reason why. It's a combination of the US having very serious penalties for trying, and also individual weakness among some of the more westernized politicians. And this is not just Thailand. This is pretty much every country. We already talked about this. Why does the panel think Macron and Stammer are up to in talking about sending troops to Ukraine? It's obedience to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He told them to do it, so now they are doing it. It's that simple. It's that simple. Again, anyone, Rasheed, if you want to jump in on anything, you're more than welcome. Iran, Yemen, axis of resistance generally retaliate after rather than attack. Why are they waiting to attack decisively? A war on them by the U.S. is inevitable, so why are they not attacking first? You have to understand that there's limits to the power of all of these nations. Russia, China, huge countries, nuclear arsenals, they have very real limits to what they are able to do. And so a country like Yemen, or an organization like Hezbollah, even more so, in Iran, has severe limits to what it is capable of doing. And that kind of ties into this next question. Let me see if I can find it here. This one right here. Why was Hezbollah able to be destroyed so easy? I don't think that they're destroyed, but they did suffer a severe blow. Analysts like Richard Medhurst claim Hezbollah had a lot of firepower, that they overestimate their capabilities. Well, you have to actually analyze the type of firepower, the depth of that firepower. Hezbollah is a defensive organization. Israel was not able to invade and take over southern Lebanon. They always enter and they get mauled and then they withdraw. That is the way of it. But beyond that, again, Hezbollah has serious limitations. A lot of people who support Hezbollah don't want to see the limitations because they don't want to imagine that it is weak and vulnerable and is not capable of overwhelming and eliminating Israel, which is something they emotionally want. But analytically speaking, it is impossible. There's a lot of questions here. Let's see. Get that one out of here. Yeah, thinking Trump is what will the effect of so many in alt media thinking that Trump is about peace and the EU is against it? Well, I think, and I'll ask Angelo and Rasheed in turn, I think the effect is, instead of holding the Trump administration accountable and creating a wave of opposition to U.S. policy that really is continuity of agenda with MAGA stamped on it, when you just go along with it, you pretend, you engage in wishful thinking, you're ignoring what is actually happening, you're enabling it and you're abetting it. And I don't mean you're doing it. Sometimes these people are not doing it consciously. They're just prone to wishful thinking. They don't want to admit that this is happening. But ultimately, people invested hope in Trump because they wanted to see this change happen. if you really want this change to happen, you have to face reality. You have to speak up against this. You have to create a wave against it. By speaking by aiding and abetting it, you're creating a wave that's just going to sweep more and more people along to support this continuity of agenda. I think that is extremely dangerous. That's why I don't care how many people leave my audience, how many people call me names. I'm going to constantly speak up about this because I think it is fundamentally important. Angelo and Rasheed, what do you think about this?
Well, I think personally, I have a lot of tolerance. I know that there's a speed, this awareness. It takes time. We've seen this in many different conflicts. We've seen it in Ukraine. Remember in Ukraine, how many people decided with Zelensky, and now they're coming back. I mean, slowly you have the laggers, and you have the one that comes really, really late. It's the same in alternative media. Not everybody, and we saw it with Syria too. Remember, we have lots of friends which are extremely smart people in alternative media. They didn't see it. They saw that Assad was the bad guy and so on. It was probably not perfect, but he was maintaining some kind of cohesion and peace somehow. Especially when it comes to minority, and they bought into this real opposition. So and then they come around, people. So I would say that slowly this is going to take time, and I have some level of tolerance, because a lot of people that actually are still trying to believe in Trump, they're getting slowly skeptical, and that's the process. And I think this is how we do it. And to be honest, we learn from each other too. Some things we don't see the full picture. It's by doing those shows, by listening to other people, that we challenge, and every time it's a constant challenge, and we might be wrong, but to be honest, if I was to be wrong on Trump, and let's say there's peace in Ukraine, I'll be the first one to say, well, he did right, but it's showing us, and I hate to be the guy to say, I don't get any pleasure in saying what I told you. If I have to say, well, I told you, it's maybe too late, and there was the damage. And what happens is that this is the purpose of what we are doing. Why are we here? We are sending, some our opinion or analysis, and people, if they are open-minded, they get this, and that's a reference, and you can challenge that, and this is how we grow together. But I would say we are tolerant. A lot of people, they are still backing Trump. They are in alternative media, and I think they are genuinely misled. And I'm okay with that. That's a process. And we might be wrong. Some points we might be wrong. I hope we're wrong, actually. Brian, I wish, I'm confident we are on the right, but I wish we were wrong, and maybe there's going to be peace in Ukraine. But no, we might come back and say, well, we told you. Rasheed.
Has happened once or twice already, Angelo. Rasheed.
Well, sometimes we have to remember that they also are humans, and sometimes the politicians speak to some of their ills too, and some of their wants. And when he's a good actor, or when she's a good actor, sometimes it carries over to that person. Not that they are wanting to mislead you; it's that they want it to be true so bad, so they hold on to every shred of belief that maybe this guy or this girl may be a little different. And as time progresses, as Angelo says, some of them come over, and then some of them, they don't come over. And so, but you can't say it about all the alternative media. You can just say it about some people. And you have to also give them a little leeway. They're human, and they have goals, they have issues, they have things that need to be spoken to. And sometimes they hold on to that is spoken to by certain people. Now, if they hold on to it after it's been proven false, then yeah, it's crazy for a person to continue to hold on to something that's not there. That's like holding on to blind love or something. But I believe that you have plants in the alternative media. I've spoken about that a lot. And they're there to mislead and divide, because that's what the alphabet agencies do. They put plants everywhere to try to keep an ear out on everything and then try to divide and put some kind of suspicion out there. But you got to give these guys and girls in the alternative media a little break, because we're not all going to agree on it, and we're not going to all get it right all the time. But at least we're trying, and some of them are trying very hard.
Yes, and I would urge people to be patient. Be patient with the majority of the people going along with this. I think we could all think to our past, in our personal lives, instances where we did not want to face reality, and we were going along with something we knew didn't make any sense, wasn't adding up. But just like Rasheed said, you want to believe in it so badly. You don't want to admit it, and reality forces you. And the longer that takes, the rougher it is. So I think it's people that are getting frustrated. I think it's a combination of that too. Watching people go through this process, and they know how rough it's going to be for them the longer this goes on. Plus, there are real consequences for large amounts of the population, the global population, being tricked into going along with this. So I mean, it is a multifaceted problem. We have to be patient. We just have to continue doing what we can do to wake up people who are receptive, and be patient with people who aren't yet. So I think that's very good advice. Only 5 more questions. I cut it out because there's like 40 of them. So I cut it down significantly. We'll never get out of here if we do all of them. Will Russia attack NATO forces if deployed to Ukraine? Russia has said that they will, and I would not try to call Russia's bluff on that. They said they will. Yes, okay. They do what they say. Okay, I just said that also. So this person is ahead of the curve here. And what would be the repercussions? Well, it would be an unprecedented war, conventional war that could escalate to nuclear war, which is why this is so insane. And then thinking about what the root cause, Russia constantly talks about the root cause. What is the root cause of this conflict? The US, its military organization called NATO, that it has coerced Europe into paying into, and its constant expansion up to and all along Russia's borders, plus wars of aggression it has waged way beyond Europe, in North Africa, in Central Asia. That is the root cause of this problem. I haven't heard President Trump talk about this even one time, what he's going to do about it. No, wait, I did. He said he's going to expand European funding of NATO by more than 2 times. So that's not a very good sign. But when you're the United States and you're fighting a proxy war, and you're talking about Ukraine being burned to the ground, and then Europe being burned to the ground, and you have the Atlantic Ocean between you and this giant fire you are lighting, you don't care. You don't care what the consequences are. I'm pretty sure the U.S. is very confident that if nuclear weapons do end up being used, it'll be between Europe and Russia, and they'll be high and dry. Because you can see how they're positioning Europe to be the next disposable proxy, and how they literally said they're pivoting to Asia. So you can see how they're already setting all this up. It's very scary. I hope people in Europe wake up to it, start doing something about it.
Brian, I just want to add one thing is, first of all, the NATO countries are not united when it comes to sending troops. And a lot of them, there's a misinterpretation. A lot of them, they talk about sending troops in a case of peace, after when peace is reached. So they don't agree to each other, and they're not very clear when to send troops. And in addition to that, there's no, when it comes to Article 5, it wouldn't apply here. Wouldn't apply. And Article 5 is not unconditional. Countries can actually assist, or they can join war, but they can assist in terms of sending weapons, but that's all. Article 5 is not this thing about, this alliance that, you have 20 plus countries that join in and fight against Russia. So we are talking about just a few countries. And at this stage, I think there's a lot of bluff, and they don't have the troops. When you combine all NATO troops, I mean, you take away the US, because the US, it seems like they're not going to join. Well, Russia has more troops. You just have to, the largest NATO country in Europe, is US, and after that is Turkey. But Turkey wouldn't join. So who's left? the British, they couldn't even fill a stadium with what they could send. France, during the Olympics, they didn't have enough army that actually could help inside France. And so they could send maybe what, 10, 15,000? What do you do? They would last like 2 or 3 weeks on Ukrainian front.
And what if Russia did just start striking these troops as they entered Ukraine? And that's what I think is going to happen. They're going to try to. You could see them doing it right now. You can see Europe. They're just Europe with Ukraine, and they're pretending they're doing this.
Brian, they've done it. They've done it. Remember though when they sent it was like close to Lviv. Those schools. They were in schools, and they sent. Yes. Hundreds died. They got scared. Once they saw that, they got really scared. So they are well aware that if they are in, they'll be the first target.
But do you see right now this week, Europe is talking about these peacekeeping forces, and they're working with Ukraine, and Ukraine's saying, yes, we're picking a team, and they're gonna oversee the monitoring process all along the line of like they're completely ignoring the fact that Russia said, we're not doing this, we're not agreeing to the ceasefire. If you send troops in there, we're gonna blow them up, and they're just pretending like I don't hear them, and they just keep doing it anyway. And what they hope is when those troops go in and they're saying these are peacekeepers, they're not there to fight Russia, and they're going to create this tremendous pressure together with the United States and President Trump pretending like these are two separate processes. Again, Secretary Hegseth literally told them to do this. Again, publicly, it's not even a secret. But then they're going to put this pressure on Russia saying this is all part of a peace process. So why are you even thinking about firing on these peacekeepers? And so you can see the corner they're trying to paint Russia into. This isn't Russia's first rodeo, so I don't think they're going to be significantly tricked. And they have already proven with the 30-day ceasefire, President Putin. A lot of people are acting as if President Putin is sympathetic to President Trump and his ceasefire proposal. It sounded like he was mocking the U.S. He's like, yeah, well, it's a great idea, but and then. No, and then can you let all the Ukrainians trapped in Kursk? Can you let them out? And he's like, well, how about you just tell Ukraine to tell them to all surrender, and then we won't kill them. It was a very sarcastic answer when you really think about it. But President Putin's a very polite, diplomatic, but highly intelligent man who can combine a very polite but also very sarcastic sentiments together in one and throw it back at the U.S. That's how I interpret it. I don't know. I didn't get a briefing from the Kremlin, and I think that was actually one of the questions. Someone said, "There's NATO officers or something trapped in Kursk?" That is the rumor, and maybe that's why President Trump is so urgently trying to rescue them. It's possible, but I think this is just like Minsk 1 and 2. If you remember back then, there was a huge Ukrainian military unit that was encircled, and Europe and the US they panicked and they were begging Russia or the Russian-backed separatists or the not Russian-backed separatists, whatever you want to believe, begging them not to wipe them out or to capture them and eliminate this giant military unit because they knew how hard it would be to reconstitute it. And Russia caved in then. Are they going to do that again now? I don't know. Okay, we're getting very close to the end. If the intention of the U.S. is disrupting China, Middle East, etc., so obvious, why are other superpowers not uniting to isolate the U.S.? BRICS is one good step forward. Well, they are. It's just the U.S. is a massive empire. It has so many resources. Its ability to project military power around the globe is unparalleled. No other nation can do that. China cannot do that. Russia cannot do that. Russia and China combined cannot do that. So it's hard to do, but they are doing it. That is what multipolarism is. It is a process of creating an alternative to the unipolar world order the U.S. controls, an alternative, and separate it, and then fortify it so that the U.S. is basically isolated. You can see that actually happening right now. It's a good question. That is what's happening. Anyone, if you want to add?
Well, I think there's also a philosophy when it comes to multipolarity. It's about non-alignment. So basically, it's not about creating those alliances of blocks, because a lot of people they confuse. They think, well, this is going to be NATO against BRICS. No. BRICS is about how to have an alternative, and how, but it's not the logic of alliances where you could actually de facto have the same as we had the Soviet bloc and European countries and the US. That is different, but they're fighting. It's much softer, and they're creating, as you said, an alternative. But it's not about the logic of blocks against another bloc.
And I also believe that when it comes to the U.S., they have been the leaders for so long that they have all of these institutions, they have all of these levels of power. And don't forget, even though the dollar is declining, it is still the world's reserve currency. So that gives them added influence, added power, added levels of pressure. And most people, when they look at it, they think it's gonna pop and it's just gonna snap your fingers and it's gonna happen. But this thing is it's a work in progress. And you have other nations, they have to be cautious in every step that they make, because they can offend the empire in such a way, because you got small nations, you have developing nations, you have up and coming surging nations. And what good would they be to trying to push in a multipolar world if their economies are destroyed, or if they're faced with a massive color revolution or a military intervention, which they cannot rebuff at the time? So they have to walk that step, those steps very, very carefully, as not to alert the empire and its allies, or not to offend the empire and its allies, and taking in consideration some of the things that the empire is saying, while also looking at their strategic moves and their strategic interests more in depthly. Because America may be wounded, but she's not dead. And if you aggravate her, she will come at you. And think about how Russia is the largest nuclear power on the planet. And Russia offended the United States because the United States believed that Russia should submit to it. By offending America, America almost pushed the world to the brink of thermonuclear war. And that is with the largest nuclear power in the world. So think about the smaller nations that are watching that. They're saying, well, if they don't care and they're crazy enough to do that to Russia, and if they're crazy enough to antagonize China, their largest trade partner, their largest investor, the largest holder of debt, the manufacturer to their stores or whatever, what will they do to us? So they have to tiptoe around the empire until they see more cracks in the dam of empire. And once the water starts seeping out of them, you'll see a rush towards out of the dollar, a rush out of Western institutions, and then the dam will break.
Yes, and a lot of that is already kind of happening, and much faster than I think a lot of people even expected. But it's still going to take a lot. People have to be patient. This problem wasn't created overnight. We're not going to solve it overnight. And this is a kind of semi-related question. What about the argument China is really just interested in trading with the world? It's not really interested in getting involved in geopolitics. As we see, they have not flexed over Gaza. And I think that kind of goes to the point that we were just saying about how China has limits. What could they do? What could they possibly do in regards to Gaza? They can't project military power into the Middle East. They have no ability to do that, even though the U.S. accuses China of being this global military threat. They literally don't have the planes, the strategic airlift or sea lift capability to move an army to the Middle East. And then where in the Middle East would they move the army, and what would they do? And then once they get there, what are they going to do to affect this? So realistically, there's not much they can do. What they can do, which is what Rasheed, Angelo, what we have said, they are working together with the multipolar world to create an environment in which this proxy war that the U.S. is waging in the Middle East, using Israel, tormenting the Palestinians, an environment in which that is no longer possible. That is what's happening. You want to talk about draining the swamp. That's what multipolarism is doing, is draining the swamp of Western imperialism. But it's going to take time. And then there's this one, and this is what gets me. There's a lot of pro-Trump people out there talking about how NED got dismantled, but then they're like, look at the color revolution in Serbia. Who do you think is funding and organizing and running that? It's the NED. And something that Angelo, you and I, because we've done these live streams for a long time on and off over the years, and we used to do live streams covering the Thai protests. You remember that they would have like a live stream, and we would stream it on our stream, and we would talk about it. And we were talking about how the NED, people are wising up to it. The Thai government was starting to try to make laws to try to restrict it. And we were talking about how these private foundations like Open Society, Omidyar, there's a whole bunch of them that fund side by side with the U.S. government. They're basically agents of the U.S. government. That's how the CIA used to do it before there was an NED. They would use these fake private foundations that pretended to be charities. That's how they would fund all of this, and that's what they've been doing. So even when they cut back or dismantle the NED, they already have been putting this into place for years because people are wising up to it. Same with USA. They now admit that they didn't get rid of it. They just streamlined it, and that's what they will do with Voice of America. And last question. 2 hours. Question, what is going on with Pakistan and the Baluch separatist terrorists? I heard they have been active lately. Actually, they've been doing these attacks for years and years. And I saw this question at the beginning of the stream, and I just got this ready for you. This is from all the way back in 2011. That's how long this has been going on. And this is in the national interest. And this is Selig Harrison, who has since passed away, but he was one of these think tank foreign policy experts, and he laid out what was a strategy that the U.S. then was using and continue to use, and to talk about free Baluchistan. So you could already see what direction this article is going. I'll save you all the details and just read the last sentence here. Pakistan has given China a base at Gwadar in the heart of Baluch territory. So an independent Baluchistan would serve U.S. strategic interests. There should be a period there. And then they talk about countering Islamist forces when the Baluch separatists are literal terrorists killing civilians. So, I mean, that's how American foreign policy works. That is what they have been doing. And this is what I'm trying to tell people. The U.S. is already waging proxy war against China, killing Chinese people, Chinese civilians, engineers, attempting to kill diplomats, destroying Chinese investments, factories, infrastructure projects that are mutually beneficial for their partner nations. And they're just turning up the heat. And they're doing this in virtually every country China does business with, including right here in Thailand. I've been talking about this for years. So,
Brian, I just want to...
Yes,
maybe we can share this. I just send you on the private chat. But remember when we covered the Baluchistan movement, the funding, this is about disrupting the
I was going to ask you about this guy, because I remember we talked about this in one of our old live
streams. This guy is based actually is one of those puppets, the same as the Shah, the Iran. There's a puppet that they're trying to push, as an alternative, in case there was to have a coup overthrowing the government in Iran, the same as they have for Baluchistan. And there's a kind of Kalat, and I think it's based in the UK. And it's very typical. So there's a puppet that they've been grooming outside, in case of, and they say, actually they have the same when it comes to all those, like the Xinjiang, they have those government in exile, and they have the same for Baluchistan. So not only they disrupted the Belt and Road Initiative, but if they manage to create a revolution there, they have already a puppet that is being groomed and funded by the West, and he's in exile in England. And the same as actually India has the similar thing. They have actually the Sikh minority, which is based in Canada, very strong, and they already prepare, disrupting India from Canada, and they are backed by the West. Is it in England or is it Washington?
It's so funny. It's called the East Turkestan Government in Exile, and East Turkestan. So this is the U.S. government openly trying to carve territory off of China. Imagine if it was the other way around. They're complaining about Chinese investors buying 1% of the 3% foreign-owned farmland in the U.S. So 3% of U.S. farmland is owned by foreign investors. 1% of that 3% is owned by Chinese investors. They're complaining about that. And look what the U.S. government is doing. East Turkestan government in exile. So they want to carve off Xinjiang, China. They got the map right there of what they want to carve off. And it's literally, headquarters, Washington, D.C. It doesn't get more obvious than that. And people are like, I don't get why.
Brian, do you remember there was the founder of this guy that actually worked for Radio Free Asia. He actually worked very closely with the CIA when there was this balkanization of the USSR. He funded the World Uyghur Congress, and when he has this meeting with the new actually political representative of Tibetan in exile, it's no more the Dalai Lama, there's a new one, and he was saying clearly that to the Americans to say, well, guess what? We have in Xinjiang, we have a lot of gas and oil. If you help us, we are going to share the wealth with you. Guess what?
Yes.
It's very similar to Zelensky. Zelensky said, well, we have minerals. Save us, and this is all yours. He's saying that while he's nobody. He's nobody. He actually was born outside of Xinjiang. He doesn't even speak the local language. And he's been working for the CIA, because when he was working for Radio Free Asia, and he was calling upon the Turkish states, all those Turkish-speaking states, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and so on, he was pushing for them to leave the Union back then,
Yes.
So that's what we had like government in exile. That's the
and it continues uninterrupted under President Trump right now. That's what the main, if there's one point we are trying to make during this live stream, it is that if you really look past the rhetoric, past your own wishful thinking and your hopes and your dreams about what should be, you will see what actually is, and you will see that it is continuity of agenda. And the sooner and the more and more people that wake up to this reality and start holding the administration accountable, and stop going along with it, stop defending it, stop making excuses for it, perhaps the sooner all of this can stop. And the real change that we all hope for, it's not that I don't hope that change actually happens, but the sooner actual real change can start to happen. I want to thank you, Angelo, Rasheed, also Danny, who has already left, and hopefully we'll be back next week, and the two of you as well. Everyone who has joined us live, and everyone who is watching this afterwards, check the video description below for everywhere you can find and follow my work, Angelo's, Rasheed, and Danny. I will put all of that in the video description below. People were asking about Rasheed's YouTube channel. I did put it in the comments, the live comments. So check all of that out. And until next time, bye for now.